This is a pretty good page though. This helpful links page. They really helped us out with those. Look at this lore. Elite Gamers Lounge. Look at our boy LevelUpLarry's on there, bro. He's in there. Let's watch a Larry video. He's been doing some Hero's Journey. I watched one of his last streams, and it looked pretty cool. Yeah, dude, his YouTube's fucking popping off, man. 3,000 subscribers. Wow, that's really cool. He's got his thumbnails are all pretty good. Lore session, Sebilis. Let's go to this.
Hey, lovers, it's Larry, and this is a lore overview.
Look at all those golems, dude. These are the golems, I believe, when you're exiting the place, and there's those little cubbies.
Empire of Ik, Ganak Sathir, and the leader of...
Look right there, dude. Look at this claw mark. This, for some reason, some creatures come by and like slashed at this thing on the wall.
The Ring of Scale.
2 points over his voice. Like, I think the music was almost like overtopping his voice, but the quality of the video editing and everything like that was really high. Really good job there, Larry. That was awesome. All right. Well, shit, man. Seems like we are at a lull. Hey, look at, there's me. I'm in the links, dude. I'm in the links, dude. We're making it. Fake it till you make it, right? Yeah, that was a good video. Very good. Like I said, you know, really good video editing quality. I would say the only feedback I would give is that at a couple of points the music actually got a little louder than his own voice, and that was all. That was the only thing. And that's tough to do. Like, it's tough to balance audio, and because you don't know about it until after the fact. Like, it's when you come back in and you go, oh my God, the music was so loud. It was drowning me out. You don't really know about that until it's occurring, until after you check the VOD or something like that. You go, holy shit, dude, I was blasting. Pretty cool. Yeah, we used to play, like, I used to play with LevelUpLarry a bit. I've hosted a few, like Conan. He likes Conan Exiles and some other games, you know, and so I've hosted a Conan Exiles server, and he's joined it before. And so, you know, it's nice to get out of just EverQuest and play with some community members, and especially some larger streamers like that, you know. Because he's a larger streamer. His quality is high. Requirements for keys/flags are no longer needed